you're going to be able to afford a home, just like I could afford a home. You've got a future. We're going to build a future. We're building a future for you guys right here. Oh my God, this is why I'm in this, actually, right there.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Maple Blooded Podcast. Our Make-A-Wish Prime Minister Mark Carney is under fire for allegations of plagiarism in his doctoral thesis. We'll get to that in a minute. Now that I'm a few episodes into the podcast, I thought I would explain what you can expect. There are a lot of podcasters who do great work and post daily. My intention with this podcast is to not necessarily break a story or comment on one immediately. I am more of a wait-and-see person, and what I want to do here is digest a story over a few days and hope to provide a fulsome commentary on a topic. Basically, I want to say what I need to say and then move on. And while you're here, please take a few seconds to subscribe to my channel and click on the like button of this video. It will help the algorithm share my content with a bigger audience. Since Canadians at large were introduced to Mark Carney in January of this year, it has been obvious he has taken, let's say, liberties with material already available to him. One of his first immediate gaffes occurred during his Liberal leadership campaign when he used a logo that was similar to the logo of Canadian debt collection company MetCredit. The irony of that is proof of God, in my opinion. Anyways, it did not go unnoticed on X, where meme after hilarious meme were posted, including this one by yours truly, a parody of the Canadian Tire logo. And eventually the CEO of MetCredit had to send an email to his campaign asking him to stop using the logo. And the liberties didn't really stop there. Mark Carney has continued to crib Pierre Poilievre's policies, including axing the carbon tax, cancelling the 66% capital gains inclusion rate, and exempting GST from new homes. Admittedly, they aren't exactly similar policies because Pierre Poilievre's are more expansive and more beneficial to the Canadian taxpayer. Mark Carney even followed Pierre Poilievre to none of it, and most recently outright adopted Justin Trudeau's housing strategy. And while I was recording the audio for this episode, I have had to make an edit here because I learned Mark Carney just announced his government would help pay for the training of tradespeople. This is literally exactly what Pierre Poilievre proposed a week ago. It is unbelievable. This guy has no ideas of his own whatsoever, but he has been presented to Canadians as the economist with big ideas and all of the answers. Now let's get to the reporting by the National Post. On March 28th, they printed this story. Mark Carney faces plagiarism accusations for 1995 Oxford doctoral thesis. Carney's doctorate in economics from Oxford shows 10 instances of apparent plagiarism according to academics who reviewed the material. The National Post obtained a copy of Carney's 1995 thesis for his doctorate in economics from Oxford University titled The Dynamic Advantage of Competition. It shows 10 instances of apparent plagiarism according to the judgment of 3 university academics who reviewed the material. In several sections of his thesis, Mark Carney used full quotes, paraphrases, or slightly modified quotes from 4 previous works without proper acknowledgement or attribution. He's just directly repeating without quotations. That's what we call plagiarism, said Jeffrey Sigalet, an assistant professor and member of UBC Okanagan President's Advisory Committee on Student Discipline, which handles plagiarism cases for the university. The National Post provided the 10 examples to Carney's campaign team. He was sworn in as Prime Minister on March 14th and is currently running in an election that would be held on April 28th. Normally, when the media is running a hit piece on a person, they would alert that person they are writing a story about them. They would ask that person to answer several questions, and they would give them a deadline to answer the questions by. What appears to have happened is Mark Carney or his team reached out to his doctoral thesis supervisor to refute the National Post story, which was included in the article. Carney's campaign provided a statement from his doctoral supervisor at Oxford University. I believe you are mischaracterizing this work. As an academic of nearly 40 years, I see no evidence of plagiarism in the thesis you cited nor any unusual academic practices, said American economist Margaret Mayer, official fellow of economics at Newfield College, in the provided statement. Mark's thesis was evaluated and approved by a faculty committee that saw his work for what it is, an impressive and thoroughly researched analysis that set him apart from his peers, added Mayer. Oxford University defines plagiarism as presenting work or ideas from another source as your own, by incorporating it into your work without full acknowledgement. A professor who is also a graduate from Oxford University, speaking on background out of fear of being sued by Carney, agreed that the problematic passages in the Liberal leader's thesis would fall within the plagiarism definition. Oxford guidelines are not atypical from other universities, he said. When you have something lifted verbatim from a source, in there without quotation marks or citation, That constitutes plagiarism, added the professor. The academics interviewed for this article dismissed the idea that Carney would have lacked the proper knowledge to properly attribute his sources at a PhD level. It seems like it's all over the dissertation, not just one part, said Sigalet. The National Post goes on to state that Carney benefited from an illustrious career after he completed his PhD. But social status hasn't stopped universities from revoking degrees, and in recent years, many European ministers have had to resign following allegations that some of their university work was plagiarized, or after having been stripped of some of their academic credentials. Last year, Claudine Gay resigned as president of Harvard University amid allegations of plagiarism, but also after facing a heated congressional hearing over anti-Semitism on her campus. Now, if you're an active social media user, you would have seen this shared by the Liberal Party and its supporters, which includes a smear of the National Post that because Post Media is partially owned by Americans, their reporting can be rejected. I don't think the National Post reporting appeared in a vacuum. I believe someone decided to look at Mark Carney's thesis because the University of Oxford and Margaret Mayer drew attention to it after Mark Carney was elected the Liberal leader and therefore the Prime Minister designate of Canada. Here's Oxford University's press release dated March 14th. Honorary Fellow and alumnus becomes Prime Minister of Canada. And what you'll see here in the fourth paragraph, the press release states, Mark's considerable abilities were apparent during his time at Newfield, where he performed the unusual and impressive feat of completing his DPhil in under 2 years. DPhil supervisor Meg Meyer recalls that his thesis on the dynamic advantage of competition was notable for its breadth, combining several varying approaches and tools to explore in detail several different mechanisms through which the presence of competition in the domestic market might enhance the competitiveness of a country's firm. She adds, Mark was an extraordinarily versatile student, rapidly mastering new approaches, perspectives, and challenges. These skills will undoubtedly serve him as he leads Canada during these turbulent times. And it didn't stop there. Margaret Meyer appeared on the CBC podcast Here and Now Toronto, where she talked about her experience of being Mark Carney's doctoral supervisor at Oxford University. Here's what she had to say about Mark Carney's thesis.
So take me back to a moment that you saw that set him apart from the other students in your eyes, that you realized there's something different about him.
Well, the thing that was most distinctive about him was that instead of doing what most students do, which is to tackle a single question with a single approach for the whole thesis, Mark tackled one overarching question by adopting three very different perspectives, three very different approaches for which he needed to master three different literatures, for which he needed to learn three different sets of tools. And he did this remarkably quickly. He finished his thesis in less than 2 years, while at the same time producing a much broader and for that matter, a much longer thesis. I showed a student today Mark's thesis, which I keep in my office, and it's twice as long as my own doctoral thesis. So the fact that he could get to grips with much more material than most students typically do in a shorter time and produce a longer thesis pretty much set him apart.
When did you first start hearing, rumors that he was considering politics?
I believe it was shortly after he left the Bank of England, but I'm not sure.
Interesting. So according to Margaret Meyer, instead of doing what most students do, like tackle a single question with a single approach for the whole thesis, Mark Carney adapted three different perspectives for which he needed to master three different literatures, and he did it in remarkable time. And she states she is so proud of his work, she keeps it in her office and shows it to other students and described it as twice as long as her own. Now look, I can't speak for Dr. Meyer, but for me, if a student did 3 times the amount of work than other students do in record time and produces a thesis twice as long as I did, it would raise a red flag. Is it possible that Mark Carney is the exception? Was Good Will Hunting about him? I doubt it because that movie's endearing. When Mark Carney was challenged by a National Post reporter during a media scrum, listen to what he had to say.
Hi, Mr. Carney. It's Stuart Thompson from the National Post. On Friday, the Post published a piece revealing 10 instances of plagiarism in your doctoral thesis. Your party responded by attacking the academic who was quoted in the piece. Some of your surrogates mentioned pulling media subsidies because they didn't like the piece. First of all, did you plagiarize? And is this a demeanor we can expect from a Carney government? Will you attack the media when you don't like the work we do?
Thank you for your question. I
I'm pleased that there's such interest in my doctoral thesis. It's sort of languished on the shelf for over 3 decades. I think what you'll find in the middle of that piece is a very clear refutation of these, quote, allegations by senior-most academic at Oxford, Dr. Meyer, who was categorical in her rejection of many of the conclusions that you just made. So if your question is, does a professor at Oxford, well, I think the statement of Dr. Meyer stands is pretty obvious where it is, and as I say, I'm pleased that there is intense interest in a game theory thesis of 30-something years ago.
I want to break this down because there are some interesting tells in his answer, in my opinion. Watch his physical reaction once the pointed question about plagiarism is asked.
Did you plagiarize? And is this a demeanor we can expect from a Carney government? Did you plagiarize? And is this a demeanor we can expect from a Carney government? Did you plagiarize? And is this a demeanor we can expect from a Carney government? Did you plagiarize? And is this a demeanor we can expect from a Carney government? Did you plagiarize? And is this a demeanor we can expect from a Carney government? Did you plagiarize?
Now, touching your neck and widening your collar isn't necessarily a sign of lying. Something like that has to be weighed in context with what a person is saying.
I'm pleased that there's such interest in my doctoral thesis. It's sort of languished on the shelf for over 3 decades. I'm pleased that there's such interest in my doctoral thesis. It's sort of languished on the shelf for over 3 decades.
I mentioned this earlier, but the only reason the media are interested is likely because Oxford and Meyer brought it up. Dr. Meyer is definitely interested in his thesis.
I think what you'll find in the middle of that piece is a very clear refutation of these, quote, allegations by senior-most academic at Oxford, Dr. Meyer, who was categorical in her rejection of many of the conclusions that you just made.
Clear refutation? Categorical rejection? He also makes sure to mention Dr. Meyer's credentials, otherwise known as an appeal to authority fallacy or experts say. I can only speculate on what Dr. Meyer's intentions are here, but her statement isn't a categorical refutation of plagiarism. She admitted that he didn't properly cite all of his work, but it's being justified because he did cite it elsewhere. So are we to presume that because Mark Carney's doctoral thesis is so lengthy, that proper citation becomes exempt? What is the measurement for that? Because to me that seems arbitrary. By that standard, a short thesis would not be exempt from plagiarism at all, but lengthier ones can contain exponentially more plagiarism? And here's an example of what constitutes plagiarism. It includes inaccurate citation. This is from Oxford University's website. This is all just so absurd. All of the parties involved have skin in the game here. Mark Carney doesn't want to be exposed as a plagiarist because his entire career would have been launched on a lie. And there is a problem for Oxford University and Dr. Meyer, because they are not going to say that they condone plagiarism, but it's also possible that they missed the plagiarism, which would call into question the legitimacy of their university. But if they found it or ignored it, that would be even worse.
So if your question is, does a professor at Oxford, well, I think the statement of Dr. Meyer stands is pretty obvious where it is.
And lastly, here he rephrased the question as if the National Post was asking about Dr. Meyer. They were not. They asked him if he plagiarized in his thesis. But he never answered that question, and he realized he wasn't answering the question well because he trailed off. What is so hard about answering that question? If you do not plagiarize, the answer is no. 1 word, 2 letters, and then you just move on to the next question. That will be it for me today. If you like what you hear, please check out the playlist on my channel for more content. You can also follow me on X at MapleBlooded. I'll talk to you again soon.